Sit down.
All right. We're live. Are we live? Yes, we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another broadcast, another live stream on the arrest of Julian Assange. We hope everyone is doing well today and is having a good Friday. I am joined by Mr. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk, coming to us in Moscow. Peter, how are you doing today, this Friday?
Great. I got a haircut.
All right. All right. Great. Looking good. And we have in London, the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander McHurst. Alexander, how are you?
I'm very, very well in troubled times in England, but
Yeah.
as I said, lots of people are now doing things. So we're here, and we're all struggling and doing what we can to make things better.
Okay. If you guys can hear me okay, let me know in the chat if everything is all right and if the stream is good. Guys, let's give an update on Assange. Alexander, you're in London.
Yeah.
What's the update on Assange? I think he was at the magistrates, and he got I think the judge said he was guilty.
Yeah.
You also have some insight as to what the judge said, which was extremely inappropriate
Yes.
for a judge. So get into that a little bit, Alexander, as to what went down in London.
There was a hearing yesterday at the Westminster Magistrates Court where, of course, this is all about Julian Assange having skipped bail and gone to the Ecuadorian embassy 6 years ago rather than answer for bail. The bail was in relation to this extradition case that had been brought against him by the Swedish authorities in order to bring him to Sweden to question him, supposedly, on these rape allegations that had been made against him in Sweden. Now, Assange always responded to that in fact, those rape allegations were unfounded, and he always made it clear that he would be willing to answer questions if the Swedes wanted to put them to him, but that he wasn't willing to go to Sweden.
And Alexander, I'm curious, the two women that were involved in that case recanted.
Well,
I mean,
they've recanted, and then they've done lots of different things. But the important thing to say about those allegations is that, of course, he was never charged with anything, never came anywhere close to getting to a charge. It's only been questioned about them. It was perfectly possible to question him in England because that was what eventually happened. Those charges were then, that investigation was then dropped. And in effect, he has been cleared of this. I mean, there are attempts in the British media today to sort of revive this whole thing. But of course, there is no reality to it, and there never has been. So Assange always argued that the real plot was to get into America on extradition charges. And of course, he's been proved right, because what we're really looking at now is an extradition request from the United States. Anyway, the long and the short of it is, because he was found guilty of jumping bail, he's now in Belmarsh prison, which is a pretty high security prison, by the way. And before very long, we're going to get the extradition proceedings started by the US. And I should say that I understand that the prison sentence is, I think it's a year. Alex is absolutely right when he said that the judge made what I thought were some outrageous statements at the end of the hearing. He called Julian Assange a narcissist, which he had no right to make. That is a narcissistic personality is a medical term. It's a term from psychiatry. The judge is not a medical man, and he's not a psychiatrist. And he had no right to speak of Julian Assange in that extraordinarily offensive way. And I was astonished to hear him talk like that. And to my mind, what it shows is the extreme antagonism, to put it mildly, towards Assange on the part of certain members of the British judiciary. But putting that aside, he's now in Belmarsh. He's waiting the extradition request. The extradition request then goes to the British government. The British government then has to decide whether or not to accept it. If it does accept it, then Julian Assange has the option of trying to dispute it in the court in Britain. I have to say that the chances of that succeeding, if he's even given the time to do it, which I'm not sure he will be. I mean, I can easily see the situation working out that he's just put on a plane and sent to America before he's had a chance to actually apply to the court. But even if he does apply to the court, I think his chances are very limited, because the extradition treaty between the United States and Britain is so lopsided in the US's favor that there's virtually no prospect, to my mind, of successfully defending an extradition request. Having said that, that's not to say that there are no grounds to do so. And I know that his lawyers are going to fight this case tooth and nail if they can. But I'm very afraid that he will be sent to the United States. And the case, which we will discuss in a moment, is going to be fought out there. And we're going to see how it shapes out in the United States. It's not the case, I must say, that I thought the US would bring. There's a possibility that once he's in the United States, they will expand the charges and they will charge him for more things. But at the moment, they brought this case against him, which is about conspiring with Manning to break into a computer to get classified information. And as we'll discuss, that doesn't look to me like a very strong case in law, either in terms of the extradition issues or in the United States, if he's ever called on to defend it there.
Peter,
yeah.
The debate as to what Assange did.
Yeah.
I mean, I was watching a lot of the media that's piling on against him is actually saying, well, number one, the excuse is, and I think it was specifically Greg Gutfeld and the Five on Fox News that I was watching, and they made the case wrongly, I may add, but I want you to get into it as to why they are wrong. They made the case that Assange essentially hacked into government computers. That's the media spin on this.
Of all networks to push that, of all networks, really, after the last 2.5 years of being Trump's publicity lawyer, as it were, celebrity lawyer. This is one of the things that really irritates me the most, because it's even deeply embedded in the Mueller report from the 4 pages, the summary that we've been given by Attorney General William Barr, is that it is accepted as a truth. It is accepted as fact that the Russians hacked the election. Okay, but they never really made actually clear what that really means. But there is no evidence that has been presented. The FBI did not even examine the DNC servers. So how they can make that claim is, well, they have to prove it to me. But it's part of the lore right now. Very disappointed that Fox would do that. There's veterans intelligence professionals. For sanity, Ray McGovern, who was on my program yesterday, and the program is airing today on RT, he and William Beeney have proven beyond a shadow of doubt, I think, and Beeney is one of the highest ranking officials at the NSA. He's the one that invented a lot of their cyber tools, and there is a strong case, almost irrefutable case, that the NSA could prove if it was a hack or was it a download. And if it was a hack, you need a lot of really high power internet to be able to move that kind of documentation over a reasonable amount of time. But a download like this, stick it in your computer, it takes a matter of minutes for the size of those documents. So we do have evidence that the Russians hacked the DNC, the Podesta emails on behalf of WikiLeaks. There has never been any evidence presented that there is any kind of relationship between Russian intelligence and WikiLeaks. None has been presented. I'm not saying it's impossible that it possibly could exist, but for 3 I always say, show me the evidence. Show me why you're saying that. They're not doing it. And unfortunately, making that contention gives the last few breaths to this ridiculous Russiagate hoax. And you saw, I saw a quick mixture on all major networks, and they're running with this like you wouldn't believe. And who's there talking? You know, the America's liar, John Brennan. And what a shameful act. The guy continues it. Hopefully his day in court will come. So there is no evidence to make that contention that Julian Assange had a relationship with WikiLeaks released these emails on Russia's behalf. There's zilch, nada evidence. I need to keep stressing that. But that's how they've taken the Russiagate to another level, in a different direction.
Can I just Alexander, on that? Yeah, on that note, Alexander, can I just ask you? I want you to respond to Peter as well, but I also want to get into it as to I heard many lawyers on mainstream media. You know, they trotted out the legal advisors on all the shows,
right?
And they said that the government, the U.S. government, and I quote many of them, have a rock solid case against Julian Assange, and the way they figured out. The way they made it so that they can extradite him, bypassing the First Amendment and the freedom of press. Many of the lawyers on CNN, on MSNBC, on Fox News said it was very clever the way the DOJ came about the charges against Julian Assange. What do you make of that, Alexander?
Right. There's lots to say, but can I first of all deal with what Peter said? Because there's an important point that I think does need to be made very clear, which is that as far as I know, Julian Assange and WikiLeaks have never been accused of hacking anybody.
Anything.
Anybody, anytime, anywhere. They've never been accused of hacking. Nor were they accused of conspiring with the Russians to hack the DNC computers. That is not an allegation that is made by Mueller in his famous indictment. What Mueller claims is that the Russians hacked the DNC computers. Peter has responded to that very clearly, and I'm not going to go over the fact that there is no actual evidence of this. But what Mueller says is that the Russians hacked those computers. He doesn't say that the Russians colluded with Assange or WikiLeaks to do it. He then says that the Russians passed on this information to WikiLeaks using this entity called Guccifer2. He does not allege, well, actually, I'll qualify that in a moment, but he does not allege that Assange was actually ever aware that Guccifer2 had anything to do with the Russians. Whether Guccifer2 actually did have anything to do with the Russians is, by the way, another question which we can discuss at another time. But that's what Mueller alleges. Mueller does not allege Assange knew that the Russians were behind Guccifer2. And if you read that indictment very carefully, which very few people have done, the indictment does not, in fact, say that the DNC emails which Assange and WikiLeaks published were part of the material that was sent to WikiLeaks by Guccifer2. The indictment is written to give that impression, but that is not what it actually says. So this whole thing is a construction made out of inferences written out of an indictment that is made to look like it says more than it really does. Now, turning to the lawyers, I am astonished that any lawyer looking at this indictment would say that there was a rock-solid case there. Firstly, this is a case of a conspiracy to break into a computer, a conspiracy alleged to be between Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. There is no evidence as of now that Chelsea Manning conspired with Julian Assange. There were certain messages that were passed between between Chelsea Manning and some other individual whom the government believes was Julian Assange. But as of now, there is no definite proof of this. The reason Chelsea Manning is being held in indefinite detention is because he refuses to confirm that it was Julian Assange. Moreover, this case, this conspiracy case, is brought out of time. There is an 8-year limitation period on bringing these kind of cases that can be extended in cases which involve terrorism. I think that even by the very loose definition of terrorism, which is used in some of the statutes in US law, this cannot fall within the definition of terrorism, since the release of information that Assange and Manning were involved in was clearly in the public interest, as confirmed by the fact that many of the same newspapers and media organizations, including Fox News, republished it. And this brings me to the next point, which is that there clearly is a public interest defense to whatever it was that Manning and Assange was doing, because what they were actually doing was exposing war crimes committed by the US military in Iraq, which was in the public interest for the American people and the people around the world to know about. So I think it is incredible to suggest that this is a strong case on the facts. I would agree that it is an attempt to get around the First Amendment restrictions on bringing cases of this kind against publishers and journalists.
Against
I am
publishers.
The journalists
no, see, this is
should be cheering that on. I mean,
the whole crux of the whole thing is
clever of the government to do that when it is their own profession that is being attacked. That amazes me. Over to you, Peter.
See, the thing is that what they want to not shed light on is the relationship between Julian Assange, WikiLeaks, and then Bradley Manning. And it's clear, it's obvious, and Glenn Greenwald is probably the best example in demonstrating this, is that this is a publisher trying to get a source to provide more information. That's what publishers do. That's what their job is.
Correct.
I've been in journalism long enough. Now, then Bradley Manning. Yes, he broke the law. He did. He broke the law. He took an oath when he entered the military to protect the country's security. And by the definition of the state, that he breached that. Okay. He paid a high price for that. A very high price. He went on trial. He was convicted. He served 7 years, and it was under extreme circumstances. He was given his sentence. Her sentence was commuted by Barack Obama. All right. I have to make a confession to everybody here. I wasn't particularly sympathetic to Bradley Manning during the whole process because, just like I said, he broke the law. Because he was in a very difficult situation of being in uniform, in current service, and being a whistleblower. It's a very difficult thing to kind of get through. But Chelsea Manning is no longer in the military and no longer under that obligation of that oath. And I think Chelsea Manning is a true hero of our time, a true hero. I have an admiration for her, for what she's doing right now. Now, with the media, see, this is what I watched. I'm watching Hillary Clinton cackle like she always does, and MSNBC and CNN. Alexander Maciris is absolutely right. They really don't want to look straight in the eye at what kind of case this is. This is the Pentagon Papers 2.0. It's just on its face, it's obvious. Okay, Julian Assange is a publisher. Up until he went into the Ecuadorian embassy, he was called that. He was universally recognized as that. And as Alexander Maciris pointed out, they never extorted blackmailed, forced, paid for to get these leaks. People went to WikiLeaks for a reason, because they protect their sources. So Julian Assange and WikiLeaks are blameless. They did their job with flying colors, and that's why the media detests them so much, because WikiLeaks crossed the bow of both major political parties and obviously the deep state, and they're all in unison to go after him. And this is what's really shameful. After what we saw the FBI do to the Trump campaign and then to a sitting president, does anybody have any trust in these people who are going to be running this case against Julian Assange? That's what makes this really grim. Now, I'm not the lawyer Alexander McCurris is here, but the bias that we saw in the British manuscript and the bias that we see in the media, I can't even conceive of if it ever goes to a trial. I doubt they want any kind of public trial. Do you think they want Julian Assange to say one word to the public in his own defense? I doubt it. I doubt it. And who knows? He may have some cards up his sleeve that would even embarrass the powers that be even more. They're not going to take that chance. No way. And that's why I have every reason to believe he's never going to get a fair shake in the United States. He is a journalist. He is a publisher. And there's only one institution, one profession mentioned in the U.S. Constitution. It's journalists. It's the only profession mentioned because they need protections. And this is throwing all of that jurisprudence out the window here for intense political bias. And Julian Assange is on the short end of the stick of this. And the worst thing, and I've said this all along in relationship to Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, it's journalists that are committing the worst sins here. I don't expect much from the state. I thought we should expect more from journalists, but they don't. They have abrogated their responsibilities as journalists, and they're just advocates for biased positions.
Alexander, if Assange does get a fair shake in the U.S. in the court system, how far up do you think this case can go? Can this reach the Supreme Court? Can Assange win?
Yeah. Well, yes, I do. And can I just say, I mean, I think the reason that it might very well do is because of some of the reasons that Peter has touched on, and which I touched on in my last, at the very end of my last answer. Because what this is an attack on journalism and an attack on free speech. What the government is trying to do here is trying to get around the protections provided to journalists by the First Amendment. If people going around Fox News saying, oh, you know, this is incredibly clever, they've come up with this very clever idea to take away somebody's constitutional right, that is a matter which ought to be a very serious concern to journalists first and foremost, and also to constitutional lawyers. Because what it says to the government is, all right, you know, provided you can find some legal trick to get round the First Amendment, or indeed any of the other protections offered by the Constitution, that's all right. The Constitution doesn't apply anymore. Now, I have to say that seems to me an incredibly dangerous line of argument to take. And I can very easily see this going all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court having things to say about it. But of course, all of this presupposes that this will be a fair legal process. And what I'm very concerned about is that if Julian Assange does find his way to the US, more charges will be brought against him, this time under the Espionage Act. This case that's been brought against him now that we know about is not under the Espionage Act. So it would, in theory, have to be conducted in public. If the case is then expanded to include the Espionage Act and involves classified information, which it might do, then at that point, it all goes secret. Julian Assange vanishes into an oubliette, and we may never see him again. And that is what I'm afraid of.
Peter, Trump, when he was asked about this, he says, I don't know about WikiLeaks, even though we have tons of video, tons of tweets where Trump mentions WikiLeaks over and over again on the campaign trail. Tulsi Gabbard tweeted that what they did to Assange was wrong. I was looking at her tweet. She said it was wrong. She came out in defense of Assange. Yeah. The replies to her from various journalists, CNN, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, were astonishing. They tried to bury and silence Tulsi Gabbard, even though she came out in support of Assange. What do you make of this?
Well, I mean, you know, I saw some of the clips earlier today of her and Tulsi speaking about this. You know, I guess this the ultimate anti-political correct thing you could possibly say, but that woman's got balls, okay? And I have a lot of admiration for her. Okay, she's a veteran. She was in Iraq. She knows what she's talking about. She knows that the WikiLeaks through Manning exposed the crimes that almost everybody that fought there knew about. I mean, the crimes were exposed. That's why this is important. Okay. As far as Donald Trump, well, okay. During the campaign, we all know that we all have a pretty good of his humor. You know, I love WikiLeaks. Well, of course, because it was hurting his opponent. Anyone would say that at the time. Okay. And that's his style. And if you can't take a joke, then you must be a liberal, because liberals don't have any humor anymore. But what he had to say in the Oval Office was extremely disappointing. Here's a man that has an opinion, a strong opinion on just about anything, except for this. That was cowardice. What the president of the United States should have said is that this is a ongoing legal proceeding, and I don't think I should be saying anything because I don't want to buy it one way or another. This is up to the law enforcement. That would have been a good answer, okay? That would have been a good answer for the president of the United States. But his answer was feckless, and I thought, you know, he certainly didn't feel proud of himself, okay? Unfortunately for Julian Assange, the well is so poisoned in the media against Julian Assange that even if Donald Trump had stood up, I mean, you got to figure Donald Trump thinks this Russiagate collusion thing is finally passed. I want to say as far away from all this stuff as possible. And I think it's just that kind of fatigue where he just wants to get away from all of this. You know, Tulsi is a person of integrity, certainly. I mean, I don't agree with everything she has to say, but on this one, again, she's spot on right. Donald Trump, you know, he didn't show his best. Let's put it that way.
Alexander, there's a lot of people in the chat right now from the UK that I'm seeing, and they're pretty pissed off. I mean, the video that we did, the other live that we did, there was a lot of comments of people, you know, saying it's a dark day for the UK. You know, I'm ashamed to be British. There's a lot of comments like that. People were very disappointed at the way the UK government handled Assange. Coupled with Brexit, is this too much for the people to take? The betrayal that's happening in the UK right now, you know, all of this stuff coming out about the way the government handled Brexit and the way they're handling Assange?
I'd like to think so. I have to say that I think for British people, for most people in Britain, Brexit is a much bigger issue than Assange is. The one point I would make, though, is that, of course, an awful lot of people who are opposed to Brexit are the kind of people who are also sympathetic to Julian Assange. So it extends, if you like, the sense of anger and disillusionment that there is here. But frankly, what I think this episode does, and by the way, I agree with all these people who've written and said that they're ashamed. I am British. I am very ashamed. I think it is terrible. I think it is disgraceful what has been done.
Has anyone come out in favor of Assange from media or government label?
No, not of the government. No, of the government, absolutely no, not. The Guardian, which is which has both benefited from Assange's work and used to cooperate with him, and then backstabbed him in the most cynical and ruthless way, published an extremely convoluted editorial in which they basically said, well, you know, we don't think he's a good person, but we don't think he should be extradited to the US either. So it was, you know, trying to have it both ways. Jeremy Corbyn has said very clearly he does not want Assange to be extradited to the US, and he's come in for some criticism for that. And Diane Abbott, who is the Shadow Home Secretary, who's Labour, she has been much stronger. She said that she opposes this extradition request and that she regards this entire case as entirely political from start to finish, about which, of course, she is absolutely right. She has come in for vitriolic criticism in the media here in Britain for saying that, just as Tulsi Gabbard, who, by the way, I think has shown great moral courage, just as Tulsi Gabbard has been criticized in the US, so has Diane Abbott also been. Of course, the government is absolutely hostile to Assange, and they have been right the way through. I mean, they have orchestrated this thing to the last detail. And frankly, I think it is a disgraceful act by an appalling government, the worst government I have seen in Britain, and I have seen many governments. My memory extends back to the 1960s. And I think that it must reinforce that sense of tremendous disenchantment and anger that the British people feel about the sort of government they have now. And I expect that we're going to have local elections very soon. We're going to have European Parliament elections very probably, even though we were promised that we wouldn't. I expect that the government is going to be very, very heavily damaged in those elections, with many of its former supporters turning against it. But I come back to what I said at the beginning. I think what is driving the anger more than Assange, the thing that is most driving the anger is Brexit. We have to be realistic about this. Many people care about Assange. I care about Assange. People who write on our threads care about Assange. Many other people write about Assange. But Brexit is the big story here.
All right. Peter, where do we go from here?
Well, I mean, I just kind of looking, using broad strokes right here. I mean, it's so disheartening that our civil liberties are being eroded, and there are not very many people, particularly in the fourth estate, journalists, fighting back for that. We have social media encroaching upon our lives and mining our likes and dislikes and our interests, selling it off to corporations to target us. We're not people anymore. We're just a commodity. And if we're a commodity, why do we need any political rights? We have governments now that flagrantly abuse the law. I mean, you have a U.S. Justice Department apparently trying their damn best to get around the First Amendment. They should be worshiping the First Amendment. Exactly. That's what it's all about. If there's no First Amendment, get rid of the rest of it. You don't need it. You don't need any of it if you don't have freedom of speech. And Julian Assange, for his flaws, and I've heard there are many, I don't care if he's a narcissist or not. He reported on the illegal activity of governments. He should be given a medal. And he should be given full protections of the law. And then you have Chelsea Manning going up to bat again. Jeez, that person has moral fiber. Does the British government, does the American government have any moral fiber left? No. They've shown themselves to be naked completely. And this is what so angers me. It's obvious that I'm angry about this because they can silence you, they can disappear you, and no one really puts up resistance. That's the time we live in. They kept saying that Russiagate, the walls are caving in. No, the walls are caving in on us, on all of us. And you have your cheap, short-sighted political biases and prejudices. You're willing to give it all away for that one moment of glee. He's gone. This is insanity. If there is going to be any future history written about this time, they're going to look upon this time as a time of great mass delusion. And they lost all of it right in front of their own eyes, and they didn't push back. They didn't even lift their finger. And that's what the times we live in now.
Yes.
And it's horrifying. In my lifetime, Alexander Makiris and I, in our lifetime, we've seen so much disappear of what it means to be a sovereign individual. And because of the way things are going now, people don't even have the ability, the foresight to see the forces working against them. And you have these elites that divert attention in a nanosecond. Before the internet, none of this would have happened. People thought a lot longer. We had longer attention spans. People wrote more interesting op-eds. People did actually research and investigations instead of being stenographers. These are the times we live in. And, Brexit and Assange and this witch hunt against Donald Trump, they all reflect the same problems that I just alluded upon.
Alexander, I saw that you agree.
Oh, absolutely.
What Peter said, and how Peter gave us some insight as to how this affects him. I think on a very personal level as well. How does this affect you, Alexander?
Well, it affects me because, first of all, I mean, I am deeply troubled by the use of the law to persecute a person who has published the truth, all of which is in the public interest. I mean, one of the very interesting things about Assange is that, of course, we never hear any longer any discussion in the media or anywhere else about the information which he published. He published information about war crimes in Iraq. He published information about the rigging of the primary process during the US presidential election, something which it is obviously in the public interest for the American people to know about. And yet this person who has published these important truths is being persecuted, not just by governments, not just by all the legal machinery of the law, but by the media. And I have to say something, which, I mean, there's two things I'm going to say about this. Firstly, going back to some of the things I remember the sort of vitriolic slander that appeared in the Soviet media against Yelena Bonner, who was Andrei Sakharov's wife, whilst he was being persecuted. I am horrified to be reading similar things, similar awful things, many of them of an incredibly salacious nature, now being spread about Julian Assange in the British media here. I am deeply shocked by it. And the second thing is, all these people who attack Assange, who in the media, these are the same people who for 3 years were propagating this utterly bogus, utterly false Russian collusion story. He always said it was untrue. He was right. They were wrong. That is why they hate him.
Yeah, the thing is, just to bounce off of what Alexander Makiris just said there, we have laws to protect people. Yeah. That's what the law is for, not to attack people.
Yes.
This is everything is turned upside down.
Yeah.
They're looking for ways to take his rights away from him to prosecute him. That is a then the law is just a tool.
Yes.
It's just a tool of oppression instead of protecting rights.
Well, indeed.
That's fundamentally wrong.
Yes.
That's not why.
Peter, before we wrap this up and we get to some of the super chats, Peter, Alexander, to both of you, I was watching Tucker Carlson. I think he was the only mainstream media journalist that actually tackled this, and I think he tried to tackle it as best he can without getting in trouble. To put it very simplistic, he has to avoid getting in trouble, obviously, but he did try to tackle this and address the Assange issue. And I give hats off to Tucker. What did you guys think of Tucker Carlson's approach to the Assange?
I thought it was
because he did lay some blame on Obama, which was interesting.
But the interesting thing is that he he's a real conservative guy, and he doesn't call himself a libertarian, okay? And libertarians would focus exclusively on a lot of the things that I just said about rights. But what I think Tucker Carlson, he put it into context of, kind of what Alexander Mercouris was saying, is that, what did he actually reveal? Wrongdoing and breaking of the law and war crimes. And Tucker Carlson is forever saying sorry for supporting the Iraq War. He does it a lot. He has a lot of courage. Most journalists wouldn't do that. So I thought it was very, very balanced. It was the first thing he talked about, and he went straight to it. And I have a lot of admiration for him for going at it. He cares about civil liberties. He cares about how the law is being used. Okay, he didn't necessarily put a lot of sympathy into Julian Assange. Was the process.
Alexander, I thought it was interesting that he also mentioned that a lot of the blame as to what happened lays with the Obama administration, which I thought was interesting and correct.
Well, indeed, it is. Now, I have to confess, I have not seen this Tucker Carlson piece, but I'm just going to make a general point first about Tucker Carlson, which is, for me, he is evolving into the greatest television journalist in the media environment, this deeply corrupted media environment you have in the United States. He is the only one who not only admits to his mistakes, but seems to learn from them and build on them and actually grow. And I mean, all credit to him. And he is showing great courage by taking the steps that he is taking. And of course, you're absolutely right. He is absolutely right if he talks about, this whole problem starting in the Obama administration. The Obama administration has set this whole situation up to an extreme level. Whilst it is apparently true that Obama was unhappy as a constitutional lawyer in a case being brought against Assange under the First Amendment, we must never forget that it was Obama, more than anyone else, who persecuted, as president, whistleblowers across the whole US governmental landscape. It was Obama and his government that pursued or tried to pursue Edward Snowden to the ends of the earth. It was Obama also who has created, or under his aegis, that was created this terrifying and very sinister coalition or nexus between the media and the security services, in which the media has now become cheerleaders for what is essentially a national security state. And of course, it was Obama who responded to the revelations of WikiLeaks about the war crimes that happened in Iraq. And remember, Obama was elected president because he was supposedly the peace president who had opposed the Iraq war. He didn't to any great extent, but that's another story. But anyway, instead of focusing on those war crimes, he green-lighted this constant media campaign against Assange and all of these various steps which various security services around the world, including, let's be absolutely clear, in Britain and I'm sure in Sweden also, have been taking against Assange and against Chelsea Manning, Bradley Manning as he originally was, the people who exposed the truth. And I'm afraid for Obama to sort of pat himself on the back and say, well, I gave the pardon to Chelsea Manning when it was under my administration that all these terrible things were done to her while she was in solitary confinement and treated in this appalling way. And for Obama to pat himself and say, well, I'm the person who defended the First Amendment because I didn't countenance charges against Assange, when in fact we know that the grand jury was in existence right through the time that Obama was president, and when Assange was holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy because Obama had said, the wolves on him. For Obama to pat himself on the back and say, what a great liberal I am, what a great constitutionalist I am, I must admit, I find it beyond awful. And it is entirely in character for a president who constantly virtue signals while actually behaving in the most sinister way.
Who's the narcissist in all of this? Yeah, who's the narcissist?
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. Yeah. Christopher, I don't know if you saw it, but Jimmy Dore is not a big fan, obviously, of Tucker Carlson, but they're beginning, even he had to agree that they were beginning to agree more and more on things. And I'm very happy about that because I will never give up trying to be in dialogue with progressives, okay? Because I think that we can make progress together on a number of issues. So some issues we can, okay? And, then we'll have to find a way to debate it, but in a civil way. But why don't we come together? I mean, like Ray McGovern, he's a pretty progressive guy, all right? Brian Becker, he's a pretty progressive guy. But I get along with him famously when we talk about foreign policy because I'm a paleocon in that way, okay? It's Pat Buchanan. I mean, I'm so glad he likes to write because it makes my day every time I see him in the American Conservative, and I share it a lot. Okay, I lost a lot of friends on Facebook, but whatever. I'm not here for a popularity contest.
Well put. Well put. Let's get to some super chats, guys, and wrap it up with some of your final thoughts. Let's see. Valley S, thank you for your $20 super chat. RSFO. 2 super chats, DKK 100, DKK 20. Thank you, RSFO, for your super chat. S. Bennett for your £50 super chat. Thank you very much for that. RSFO for another super chat. Julian Assange held a copy of History of the National Security State by Gore Vidal. Had to donate again to highlight that. All right. Thank you for your donation. Yes, he did hold that in his hand. And American Rebel, thank you for your super chat. Paramount that the Duran carries on. Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, thank you very much, American Rebel. We are going to carry on and we are going to continue to bring you this news and break the story on Assange as best as we can. Peter and Alexander, some final thoughts before we sign off?
Well, my final thought is that, we are living in very dark times. It now depends more than on anyone else on the lawyers. Because, and that's something I really want to express to lawyers, both in Britain and in the United States. Are they going to uphold the law, or are they also going to become handmaidens to power and allow the law to be used in the way that Peter said, as an instrument to crush people, as opposed to a shield to defend them? If the law goes, then we are living in very, very bad times. There's a famous quote from a play about Sir Thomas More. Thomas More himself never said this, but it is in this play, which says, somebody says, "I will chase the devil and I will do away with all the laws that stand in my way." And the reply comes, "And if the devil turns on you and the law isn't there, who will protect you?" And that is what every lawyer needs to remember looking at this case. You might be a very conservative lawyer, like Andrew McCarthy is, who writes for National Review, or you might be a left-wing lawyer, like many of Jen Robinson is, who actually defends Assange. But they all have to now work together to defend the integrity of the law, be they judges, be they lawyers in the United States and in Britain, and to see that the protections that we all depend on are protected. Because if that goes, there really is nothing left.
Peter, any final thoughts?
Just to echo everything that Alexander Mikiris had to say. In the UK and the US, over the last few years, there's been a huge erosion of trust. And there's a huge legitimacy deficit going on right now. And if Julian Assange isn't given a fair shake, and I think it's widely the consensus that he won't be, the damage will continue, and then it becomes the norm. And that's when things start unraveling. We are in a process of social, political unraveling right now. And this is only increasing it and making it worse. There's no healing time for all the things that we've gone through. And people will lose hope in the system that it is, at least nominally speaking, is there to protect them. And if those protections are not afforded, then the unraveling will just increase, and very, very rapidly. So these small-minded, cowardice people in the Fourth Estate, they better sober up real fast, because they won't even have to call themselves journalists anymore. Just call them what they are: hacks. Paid hacks for power. And that's what it's gotten down to. These are very, very dangerous, murky, dark times. And it's up to people like us doing this podcast to have to keep an eye out, because the people that are supposed to do it are not. They willfully will not do their job.
Yep, I agree with that, Peter. And thank you to everyone that supports us and watches us. Without you guys, we wouldn't have this. So we thank you very, very much for your super chats, for your donations on Patreon and PayPal, anyone that's bought a shirt, and everyone that just tunes in and hits the like button and shares the channel and subscribes to the channel. Thank you guys very, very much. You make a huge, huge difference, not only to this channel, but to people like Assange and to people that want to get the truth out there. So we thank you very, very much. And guys, just to do some, just to announce some news, we are starting an Instagram page. You can find us on the Duran_com. It's just starting out, so follow us on Instagram as well. We're just announcing our posts, and soon we'll be announcing our videos as well. We'll put that on our Instagram page. So the Duran_com, you can follow us on Instagram there. And if you're having trouble getting notifications, you can download the Blank Chat app, and I put all the notifications for our videos. I announce them ahead of time as well when we have videos coming up. So you get the notification there. You can follow our channel there on the Duran. So look for us there as well. Thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. We really, really appreciate it. We have another video coming up. I believe it's me and Alexander discussing Iran and them being designated as a terrorist organization, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Yes, that video should be going up in about an hour's time, so look out for that as well. And we will be having more updates on Assange and more live streams throughout the weekend. And of course, we have our Monday live stream as well. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. Thank you very much, Peter. Great show yesterday on Assange. It was fantastic. Guys, if you haven't seen it, look for that on YouTube. It was a fantastic show. Ray McGovern, Joe Loria, really, really good show. And of course, we have the one, the only Alexander Mercouris, the Oracle of London as well, joining us and lending us his expert legal insight and tearing down a lot of the BS we heard today on all the mainstream media as to what's going on in the Assange case. Thank you very much, Alexander. All right, guys, thank you. We hope you have a really good Friday and a good weekend. Take care.